And now, friends, before I say goodnight, there's somebody I'd like you to meet. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the woman in my life, my 16-year-old daughter, Karen. You know, folks, Karen thinks that being an actress would be just wonderful, so I thought I'd give her a chance to see what it's really like out here. Okay, now here's your chance to do anything you want. There's the camera and there's the audience, so go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Karen Knott. You're on. I knew this would cure her. Anyway, folks, I think we ought to
now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to do my impression of Geraldine Page. I know my world is crumbling about me. My hair is in strings. My job lost to another. I prayed. Oh, how I prayed for some small favor. Never have I avoided my image in the mirror, but now it is more than I can bear. And don't think I'm not aware of what people are saying. Those Fenster girls, so clannish. Lorraine was pretty, and then, overnight, it went. Just an old maid peeking behind the lace at the second-story window. Some people should be allowed to live their lives. Other people should stop talking and let them live, and I mean it. Promise me one thing, will you? What's that, Dad?
If you ever get your own show, give me a break.
Okay, it's only fair.
You know, I just can't believe that she's 16 years old. I can remember when she was just like, well, that size.
Oh, I still am about that size.
You know what?
Thank you so much for being here. I love this crowd. Thank you. Well, that clip you were just watching was from my dad's show, The Don Knotts Variety Hour, taped back in 1971. As you can see, I was pretty young. Actually looked just the same. Dad was Don Knotts, so, you know, I really miss him. I wish he could be here to see this. And we wouldn't all be here now if he hadn't touched all of us in some very special way. So I'm going to share with you some of my favorite stories and behind-the-scenes memories. And I'm going to be honest with you, too, because that's the kind of woman I am. In fact, I'm so open and honest, I don't always present myself in the best light. But I am who I am, like me or not. I'm just really hoping that you'll like me. It'll be a much longer show if you don't. Well, I've been taking this show on the road. It's been a lot of fun and traveling these towns. And people always seem to think that I'm from the Midwest or the South because of my dad, you know, and I explain to them, no, I'm a California girl. My childhood was in Glendale, and my teen years I spent in Beverly Hills. But I'm not like those Beverly Hills brats. Not like Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears. For one thing, I still have my driver's license. A lot of people want to know what it's like to be related to a celebrity. Well, it can be a little surreal at times. Like, even as a kid, you know, people would just say, I love Don Knotts. And I would say, well, I love Don Knotts too because he's my dad, but why would all these other people love him so much? But I would soon realize just how special my father was. Even as a toddler, I was amazed at my father's ability to play. You know, and I think when I was 6, I suddenly realized, oh, that Don Knotts is the same Don Knotts who was also Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show.
If you don't know how to handle one of these things, you got no business carrying one.
But, you know, I suppose you could tell I'm Don Knotts' daughter. We look a lot alike. Sometimes I hope I do look like him so I can be recognized and get free haircuts at Floyd's barbershop. And sometimes I hope I don't so I can get dates. I've been tied up in knots in more ways than one. For one thing, people still ask me if we're related to Knott's Berry Farm. Let's explain that that's spelled Knott''S. And we're not possessive, we're plural. I know how lucky I am, you know. And not only did I have a father who was a world-famous comedy legend and all that, I had a dad who was my best friend. He really was my buddy. We were even color coordinated. And Dad's not with us anymore, but before he died, he left a note. He wanted me to read it to all of you, so here it goes. Dear audience, this is my daughter, Karen. Thank you for coming out to give her your support. Just remember, if her show is a success, she's my daughter, Karen Knotts. If her show bombs, she didn't learn it from me. And to those of you who remember me fondly, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Don Knotts. Well, now we come to Chapter 1, Section A of the show, Don Knotts' childhood. So I want you to close your eyes and picture, if you will, a farmhouse in the hills of West Virginia with a big porch. I said, close your eyes! Here I am, Karen. Oh, I can't see a thing without my glasses. There they are. Oh, Lord have mercy. I wasn't expecting such a big crowd. I'm here to tell you about my little nephew, that little rascal, Donald Knotts. Donald was born in West Virginia during the Great Depression and raised mainly by my sister Elsie. Well, she was 40 years old at the time. It was kind of a surprise. So she called her boys together. She already had 3. And she said, now, boys, I have a surprise for you. There's a new little young one about to be hatched in the barn. And her youngest one, little Earl, never one for staying focused, interrupted and said, hey, Mama, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the chicken, of course. God wouldn't lay an egg. Now, would you rather I have a baby boy or a baby girl? And Earl interrupted again, and he said, well, Mama, if it wouldn't push you out of shape too much, I'd like a pony. Fortunately for her, she had Donald instead. Times were hard. They lost the farm. They sold that and they moved into town to a house, and Elsie had taken in boarders to make ends meet. And that meant that Donald had to give up his bedroom and sleep in the kitchen. Well, his earliest humor influence was his brother Earl. When Earl grew taller, everybody called him Shadow because he was so skinny he didn't have one. But Donald listened every day to the radio, to the great comedians of the day. And he just loved the ventriloquist Edgar Bergen and his dummy Charlie McCarthy. So he was inspired to go into show business. Now, how he was motivated by a ventriloquist on the radio, I'm not really sure. He saved up his nickels, pennies, and dimes, and one fine day, he marched down to that corner drugstore and bought the dummy in the window he had his heart set on. He named it Danny. Well, he worked really hard, and by the age of 13, he was already making money at parties with his aunt. And years later, during World War II, when he applied for active duty, he put down on the form that he was a ventriloquist, and that's how he ended up in the Performers Unit Special Services overseas. The performers put on a show called Stars and Gripes, and it was a wonderful show. Donald was a great ventriloquist, but he started getting a little bored, mainly because the dummy was the one getting the laughs. So he went to the officer in charge and asked to be promoted from ventriloquist to comedian. And the sergeant said, Mr. Knotts, you're the only ventriloquist we've got. So Donald hightailed it over to the infirmary. He found some bandages, wrapped them around the dummy's jaw and head, took that dummy out on stage and told the audience that the dummy had a toothache and couldn't talk. It was so funny with that dummy. I wrote a little song about this. If you don't mind, I'd like to sing it for you. Hit it, boys.
He was born in 1920 1924, Great Depression knocked on the door. They rented out his room to boarders, so the kitchen became his sleeping quarters. He was just plain Don to his big brothers. They used to fight amongst one another. Little Don was skinny, not much of a scrapper. He'd hide in the kitchen, he was quite a napper.
Don, Don, the farmer's son, only had one bullet for Barney's gun.
Not another one like him never was. He knew how to nip it in the bud. He knew how to nip it in the bud. Don, Don, the farmer's son, only had one bullet for Barney's gun. Not another one like him never was. He knew how to nip it in the bud. Knew how to nip it in the bud.
Well, when the war was over, Dad headed back to West Virginia University so he could get his degree. And there, in a drama class, he met his future wife and my mother, Kay. Isn't she pretty?
Now, my mother never did want to go into show business. She was just taking drama for fun. Now, her father was the Methodist minister, the Reverend Carl. And here's a picture of him with my mother when she was a little girl. And the Reverend could be very serious where church matters were concerned. Once he got an important phone call. Reverend Carl? Oh, that's terrible news, terrible. Of course you can count on me. I'll pull you through this. Meet me at my office at the church on Sunday. God bless. Thank you, Lord, I got a funeral. Woohoo! Now we can pay the electric bill. When Mother brought Dad home to meet her father, the Reverend Carl, he liked him very much. But when he saw how much in love they were, insisted they'd get married. Whoa! That may have been the actual origin of Dad's nervous guy character. But they did get married, and they moved to Manhattan. Mother got a job, and Dad began making the rounds of casting directors' offices. Now, he knew he was going to need a lot of luck to make it in show business. So every morning at breakfast, he ate a big bowl of Wheaties. You see, the cereal Wheaties, Breakfast of Champions, made its debut in 1924, the year Dad was born.
So he thought it was his lucky cereal. As a boy, he dreamed of being a famous baseball player like the great Lou Gehrig. So he ate Wheaties for inspiration.
As an actor, he ate Wheaties for strength. It takes a lot of walking to make the rounds in New York. He ate so much of that darn cereal, I always thought it would have been nice if they would have put Dad's picture on the box. All they would have had to do is change their slogan from Breakfast of Champions to Breakfast of Nervous Comedians. Now, about that time, one of the biggest hit comedy shows on TV
Was Jackie Gleason's Cavalcade of Stars. All the young comics wanted to get work on that show because Jackie was such a big star.
But Dad got up the nerve to call. Said, hello? I'd like to get work on your show. What kind of work do you do? I'm a comedian? We already got a comedian. Okay. Then Dad remembered an offer from one of his former Army buddies, Lanny Ross. Lanny was a big popular singer back in those days. And to his amazement, Lanny got him a job on a national radio show called Bobby Benson and the B-Bar-B Riders. Dad played Whitney Wales, an old-timer who told tall tales. Well, Dad was becoming known for his amazing voice, and that led to the part of a mute on television. He played the role of Wilbur Peterson on the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. Dream sequence. Oh, how far we've come. Dad was a mite superstitious, so he told the producers he refused to help out with the actual search. If they found tomorrow, he'd be out of a job. Well, Dad was great in this dramatic role, and it always kind of bothered me that they never let him play dramatic roles after he became famous. Because, if Andy had come along, I think my dad would have been the next Marlon Brando. Everybody knows Marlon's most famous role of Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire. Now, suppose Marlon hadn't made it to the audition and my dad showed up. Picture this, a streetcar named Don Knotts. Dad was doing pretty good. He was actually making enough money to buy a house in the suburbs. So, here's a picture of Dad with two other fathers from the neighborhood, and that's me he's holding in his arms. He's already giving me my first acting lesson. He was telling me to act dry. Naturally, I failed. Well, Dad was starting to get nervous about how he was going to feed this family of four when suddenly he got the big show business break he'd been praying for. He got a part in a major Broadway show. It's called No Time for Sergeants, starring Andy Griffith. And Dad actually had two parts in this movie. He played Andy Griffith's pa, an old-timer who told tall tales, and the Army psychiatrist. Now, when Andy and Don met, they hit it off right away. I mean, they were both good old country boys, and they had big fun together backstage whittling wood. No, I'm not kidding. They actually did this. They whittled wood. I'm serious. Well, when the show closed, they went their separate ways. Andy headed to Hollywood to star in the classic film A Face in the Crowd, while Dad stayed in New York and became a regular on Steve Allen's Tonight Show. This show was like the equivalent of Saturday Night Live, except it was really live. Now, in this sketch, Dad is playing an actor who's so short he has to be propped up on an apple box to appear normal size. These days, we call that Tom Cruising. But his biggest thing that he was known for on that show was the nervous guy. There's Tom Poston and Louis Nye, and there's Dad in the middle raising Cain.
Now, the bit consisted of Steve Allen would go around and interview people. It was the original Man on the Street. He'd interview them and ask them their occupation, and when they came to Dad, he'd ask him what he did for a living, and Dad would say something like, he made bombs, or he was a brain surgeon. And he'd be shaking. And Steve would say, are you nervous? And Dad would say, nope. So that word nope became like a household word for a while. So anyway, at this time, when that show ended, there was like a change going on in business. Like all the New York productions started to migrate out to Los Angeles, and our family moved out here too. And then Bob Newhart caused a sensation with his comedy album of monologues called The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. So all the comedians then wanted to make comedy albums, and Dad made one too.
It's called An Evening with Me, and it was a very funny album. But unfortunately, sales were not what they should have been. And as a kid, I remember seeing a stack of those albums on the shelf in our den. And so one time, Tommy and I were thinking, what could we do on a Saturday? And Tom said, I know what let's do. Let's sell lemonade. And I said, no, I got a better idea. Let's help Dad. Let's sell his comedy albums and surprise him. So we loaded up Tom's radio flyer with Dad's albums, pulled the wagon down to Kenneth Road, which is a very busy street, set up a sign saying, Don Knotts comedy albums, 25 cents each. We were going for $2.50 in the stores. Man, what business we were doing. We were doing great. And suddenly I see Dad's car pull by, screech to a halt. Car backs up. He says, what are you kids doing? I ran over to the car and I said, Dad, we sold all your albums. And I handed him a big jar of cash. He said, all right, kids, get in the car. I'm going to go home and make a phone call. Who are you going to call, Daddy? I'm going to call my manager and tell him he's fired. You're doing better than me. One morning, Dad read an article in the Hollywood Reporter that made him jump right out of his skin. It said that Andy Griffith was set to star in a new television pilot about a small-town sheriff. Well, he called him on the phone and said, hey, could you use a deputy? And he said, Don, I had no idea you were out of work and available. I'll set up a meeting with the producers and you go on in first thing in the morning. So Dad went in and he pitched the idea of an overexcitable character named Barney Fife, and Barney Fife was born.
Dad worked on that show 5 days a week, sometimes 12 hours a day. We didn't get to see him much. And I wanted to be a child actor. I think mainly because I wanted to be on that show. But Dad wouldn't allow it. He said it was a lonely life for a child. But sometimes he would take us to work with him. And I have vivid memories of my first day on that set. Wow! I love coming to downtown Mayberry and seeing all the familiar stores. But when I get up close, they're just fake fronts with window dressing. What a disappointment. I thought Mayberry was real. But I love talking to the cast. They always give me a big hug. I love Betty Lynn, Thelma Lou. She's always so, well, you can see how warm and friendly she is. And I love Ronnie Howard. We're the same age, but he's not like any of the other kids I know. One thing, he's got his own schoolhouse right in the middle of the set, and a private teacher to do his bidding. And I look over, and there's Aunt Bee. She's smoking a cigarette. I went over to her and I said, "Aunt Bee, you're smoking." And she said, "That's right, kid. I'm still a hot chick." Oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. And then Jimmy Neighbors comes up behind me and lifts me up over his shoulders and twirls me around. Oh, that was fun. I think everybody thought it was cute, except for that time the crew had to clean up after I got sick on the Gomer coach. Oh, those were my happy days. When I started the show, Ronnie was so young he didn't even know how to read. So his daddy, Rance Howard, was on the set to help him learn his lines. And Dad would take him out to the back and they'd play catch together. All the actors loved him and they called him Little Ronnie. They call him Mr. Howard now. I'm the only one that still calls him Opie. Mr. Well, Aunt Bee was played by Frances Bobbier, and Andy Griffith discovered her in a play on Broadway called The Nut House. And Jim Neighbors was also discovered by Andy Griffith. He was performing at a nightclub right here in Santa Monica called The Horn. Anybody remember The Horn? Yeah, and his act consisted of singing opera and telling hillbilly jokes. And he said, "We gotta use that boy somehow." Well, when Jim joined the cast of the show, there was a tinge of envy on Dad's part because, well, Jim was new and he was getting a lot of attention. But Jim was just in awe of my dad. And one day they were relaxing backstage, and Jim just blurted out, "Golly, Don, how can you be so funny?" Dad thought about it and he said, "Well, Jim, it helps when you look like I do." Don Knotts and Andy Griffith were a comedy team. Andy was the straight man, and Don was the funny man. But Andy had a little problem because he was also my dad's biggest fan. And so sometimes they'd be shooting a scene right in the middle of a take, and he'd get to laughing at something Barney was doing, and he couldn't control it. He had a laugh that was just out of this world. He'd start to shake, and then he'd start to stomp around, and then this laugh would erupt out of him like a volcano, and he'd go like this and punch a hole right in the set wall. I actually saw him do this. You know who really loved his laugh? The grips on the set who made overtime pay patching up those holes. Every Monday night at 8 o'clock, our family gathered in front of the TV, along with the rest of the country, to watch the Andy Griffith Show. And it was amazing to watch Dad. His performances were so perfect. He made us believe that Barney Fife was a real person. But I remember so many Sundays when Dad would burrow himself away and work on his lines for the next week's episode. We were forbidden to disturb him, of course. But I used to sneak over and stand outside the door and I'd listen to him work, and it was amazing because he would take each line and break it down maybe 30 different ways, trying out subtle shades of inflection on each and every word until he found the best reading of the line. Trying out subtle shades of inflection on each and every word until he found the best reading of the line.
drawing out subtle shades of inflection on each and every word until he found the best reading of the line. Few people realize that Barney Fife is such a carefully crafted character. But Andy Griffith knew. He once said on Larry King Live, he loved to look into Don's eyes and watch him turn into Barney Fife. Wow. Dad's success got our whole family on the cover of TV Guide.
Dad, of course, and Tom and me, and that's my mother, Kay. Now, my mother was the stabilizing influence of our family, and she was very needed because my dad could be pretty neurotic. She was also kind of worried about me because I spent a lot of time talking to myself out loud and making faces in the mirror. Her remedy was piano lessons. So she hired a teacher, and the teacher's name was
Maya Outre, and believe me, she was very outre. Well, Kay, Karen is very musical, although she is missing a few keys.
She has that same strident forefinger and well-defined thumb position as the fabulous Contessa Indira Kasova. I mentored her for years, you know, before she went on to become featured pianist of the classical ensemble of Chatsworth, California. Karen does have God-given talent, but I don't think it's with the piano.
Have you seen the faces she makes? If only she could play the piano with her face. That was the end of Omaya. That was just fine with me. Because I hated to practice. It was much more fun to fantasize. And Tom and I loved to pretend we were spies. I don't know where we got the idea to be spies. Well, we loved watching all the great spy shows on TV, the 1960s. Oh, and we acted out the parts. Tom would pretend to be the man from Uncle, and I was the girl from Aunt.
We equipped ourselves with all the latest secret weapons that you could obtain by cutting a box top off your favorite cereal and sending it, along with 50 cents, to a mysterious address with the letters P.O.
Our most favorite spy gadget was James Bond appearing spy king. And our favorite place to spy was on the stair landing where no one could see us, but we could see and hear everything. And that's how we first found out some important information about our dad. Wow, Dad's going to be nominated for another Emmy. Dad's going to make a Dodge commercial. Dad's moving out of the house. What?
Dad's moving out of the house? Wait. Well, our parents decided on a trial separation. And a few months later, they were hiring spies of their own. They're called divorce lawyers. Well,
Dad moved out of the house and into the Sunset Marquis Hotel. This hotel was where a lot of celebrities stayed when they had problems with the 3Ds, divorce, drugs, and debutantes. But Dad wasn't having any fun. He was miserable. And Tom and I came to visit him on Christmas Eve, and there wasn't a single Christmas ornament in the whole hotel room.
so we decided we had to do something. So we left the hotel room, and unlike today's kids, we didn't have any money on us. We just walked. We just started walking, and then we saw something green and shiny lying across the street. Now picture a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy negotiating the traffic on Sunset Strip, but when we got there, wow! We found this little abandoned tree. It was a Charlie Brown tree. Then we went through the dumpster and we found some cracked ornaments, some tangled silver tinsel, and a big red bow off a bottle of Jack Daniels. We carried the whole kit and caboodle back to Dad's hotel room, set up the tree and decorated it. Wow, this is really looking good. Then, when Dad came out, he was so depressed he didn't even see the tree until he practically bumped into it. What's this? What did you kids do? Well, we thought you needed a tree, Daddy. Oh, well, you're right. I did need a tree. Thanks, kids. This is the nicest Christmas present I've ever had. And he hugged us. Now, at this point, Dad was no longer on the Andy Griffith Show. Okay, everybody always wants to know why. Why did he leave the show? Well, when Andy started out the show, he said he was only going to do it for 5 seasons, and he was very definite about that. So when season 5 came around, Dad nervously started looking for work. And incredibly, he was offered a 5-picture deal with Universal Studios, which of course he accepted. Then Andy changed his mind and decided to continue the Andy Griffith Show, but it was too late. However, Dad came back and did guest spots, and the two of them worked together all their lives. And that summer, they did a live stage show at Harrah's in Lake Tahoe with Jim Neighbors, and they also did it with Jerry Van Dyke. He was one of Barney Five's replacements on the Andy Griffith Show. Well, I was visiting there one summer, and Dad took me backstage. I remember this big theater and curtain, beautiful velvet curtain. He said, "Come on, honey, I want you to hear something." He took me up to the back of the curtain, and he said, "Put your ear up there." And I did. He said, "What do you hear?" And I said, "Well, I hear people talking and laughing and being silly and glasses clinking and crinkly, crunchy things." That's right. You see, every audience has its own personality. And I listen to that audience before the start of every show. And that's how I know how they're going to react, what kind of laughers they're going to be.
And I do the same thing now, and that's how I know about all of you. Starring in his own movies was the next big challenge for Dad. He was pacing the floor at night. That's how nervous he was. But he took Tom and me, we got to be a part of it. I finally had my big break because I was going to get to be an extra in the shakiest gun in the West. My big break. Here's a picture of Tom and me in our Western costumes, hamming it up there on the set.
And the director, Alan Rafkin, when he saw us doing that, he called us for a meeting and said, "Okay, kids, you two are the most important extras in this entire movie, and maybe even the whole back lot. But you know what extras do, don't you, kids? You're seen but not heard. Okay? Seen but not heard. So pick a lock."
Okay, I get it. No, extra's not the center of attention, just there as a support. I understand. So, I was so excited when I found out that I was going to be playing a terrified townsperson in the middle of a big crowd scene. Wow, Dad was getting ready to face Black Bart, the evil gunslinger. Black Bart said, "I'm going to kill you." And Dad said, "I'm going to drill you." And the scene was really scary, so I reacted. Cut! Huh? The director was motioning me to move back. Huh? Oh, okay. And action! So, they did the scene again, and Dad's expression was so silly, so funny, I just started laughing. If I had been Andy Griffith, I would have punched a hole in the set wall. And then Dad came over to me, and he pulled me aside, and he explained to me that I had ruined the tape by laughing in the middle of it, and I promised I wouldn't do it again. But it's not so easy. It's not so easy to not laugh at Don Knotts, even when he's your dad.
But then I see this woman coming towards me, and she says, "Hello, Karen, I'm Gabardine.
I'm the wardrobe mistress on this picture. We're going to spice up your wardrobe a little bit with this hat. I want you to put it on, don't take it off."
It feels a little big, but okay. So I did the scene again, and this time there were no more stops. And afterwards, Dad came over to me and he said, "Karen, that was perfect." Gee, thanks, Dad. Oh, it was really thanks to the hat, because it had this wide brim and it cast a shadow over my face so you couldn't see me smiling. When I looked back, you couldn't see my face at all. But I was so proud to be in this movie that
It brought my father into the pantheon of great old Western heroes like Alan Ladd, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, and now Don Knotts. The whole adventure started off my love of hats. When I turned 13, I started junior high school.
my father had played the part of a fish in The Incredible Mr. Wonderful. Okay? So my Achilles heel was an Achilles fin, because they knew this. So I would be singing, my song, my favorite picture of Mick Jagger, "I can't get no satisfaction." And I'd hear somebody yell, "Hey, fish lips!" I'd whirl around and say, "That's not finny." I think I'm pretty sharp.
I struggled for a long time to find an identity separate from my dad's. I finally got me down now, and that's why I love it. And I don't mean to carp on it, but I love it when guys and go, holy mackerel!
Well, what I loved about that school, though, was I was finally old enough to take a drama class. Yay! And my teacher, Miss Oleander, thought I had potential. So I decided to tell Dad that I wanted to be an actress. I had no idea how he would react. He had a complete meltdown.
Karen, do you realize how many people spend their entire lives trying to break into show business? If you do this, and I say it with love, honey, I will never help you.
What? What? Not a wait till you're older, not a maybe, not a let's ask the magic 8 ball, nothing?
I knew he was right about how hard it is to break into show business, but still, it was something I had to try. So how do I get my dad on my side? I must convince him that I am an actress who can play a broad range of roles. Comedy, tragedy, Shakespeare, blackout sketches, pratfalls, slam poetry. I would do whatever it takes. Well, next semester, I got to be in the class of dreamy Mr. Corrigan. He taught the method, and he arranged for our class to do a performance in front of the PTA. I thought, this is perfect. I'll invite Dad. He'll see the budding actress in me. But I didn't realize we were beginning drama students. We were not going to get to do scenes from great plays starring Geraldine Page, like Toys in the Attic.
I know my hair's in veins, my job lost to another. I'll pray, oh how I'll pray. Oh no. We had to do a pantomime of an animal or an insect. So I chose to do my pantomime about the most dramatic insect I could think of. The cockroach. My story concerned a mommy cockroach struggling to find food to feed her babies. Until her life was cut short by a human foot. Oh no! Splat!
I was furious. The audience was laughing at my deep and moving performance. I felt like the biggest failure. And afterwards, Dad came up to me and he said, Karen, that was great! I don't know whether to give you a bouquet of flowers or spray you with rain. And then, when I finally got to do scenes as a human instead of a bug, all my lines came out sounding like Aunt Bee. Well,
because when I was a kid running lines with Dad, I practiced talking like her. Andy, Barney, there's a big basket of fried chicken and pickles and cornbread.
I want you to eat it all up. Don't leave a single crumb. I want everyone to be as plump as me. Well, about that time, I was getting kind of plump myself. My mother was getting remarried.
I chose to stay with Dad because I was old enough to make that choice. And I chose him because I thought he needed me. Well, I think I needed him too. And Dad moved to Beverly Hills, and he rented a house in Beverly Hills, and I started going to Beverly Hills High. Now, this may sound very exciting and glamorous and all that, but actually, I was miserable in that school. So in my old school, I was kind of a big fish, but in this school, I was just another famous guy's kid. Well, to give you an idea of the competition, one of the most beautiful girl that I've ever seen up close, either then or now, was in 3 of my classes. Christy Brinkley, hello! Was she gorgeous? And when I stood next to her, we looked like Huntley Brinkley. School had all these cliques of the hippie rebels, the brainy smart kids, jocks, the beautiful people, and the really lucky kids with multiple personalities who can fit in with any clique. Me? I was even rejected by the nerds. Then, I changed my whole way of moving, my whole wardrobe, everything. And then, I was rejected by the hippies. Whatever. So wanted to be liked. I even asked Dad, how can I be popular? He said, Karen, lose the glasses and the hat. Really popular like him, and not too many people knew about this, but Don Knotts was a ladies' man, He never had any trouble getting dates when he was single. Why? Well, he was funny. He was charming. And he had big blue eyes. He was the everyman's Frank Sinatra. You might say he was Frank Sinatra light. Name. Unfortunately for me, as weird as I was at home, Dad was still my best buddy. And the house we were living in was gorgeous. It was owned by the actress Arlene Dahl. Now, she'd been a pretty big movie star in the 1950s, and she'd also written a book about how to dress for a date called Always Ask a Man. Her portrait hung in our living room. Oh, I used to stare and stare at it. I thought, oh, Arlene is so beautiful. She's got it all together. If only she were here, I'll bet she could help me figure out my problems. Oh, she were
Here I am.
Arlene, you can speak?
Yes, now how can I help you, Karen, darling?
Oh, I want to be beautiful. I don't want to look like you.
Well, I'm afraid you're out of luck.
What's the
Well,
next?
you're intelligent.
No, I'm really not that smart.
Well, then you're a social butterfly.
Are you kidding me? I don't have any friends.
Well, then what's wrong with you?
I'm a teenager.
Karen, darling, when I was barely 17, I had a screen test at Warner Brothers, and on the set I met Carol Reiter, the leading guru of astrologers, and he said to me,
Somebody call Carol Channing.
Carol, we were not channing, we were channeling. This is my channel, now go away.
No, honey. Go back to PBS. You were doing fine.
The most beautiful women in the world, and they were no help. But Dad then did come up with an idea to help me. And now I should explain. He was not the type of father to give advice. If I asked him a simple question like, Dad, do you think I should go see the dentist this week? He'd say, oh, honey, I don't know. But he actually came up with some advice. He suggested that I have a party and invite all the kids from school that I wanted to get in with. And he was going to chaperone with his beautiful second wife, Laura Lee. The ladies' man. Well, the trouble was I didn't have any friends at school. So I just passed out a bunch of notes to people and anybody who would take them, asking them to invite their friends. Well, word spread around school about the big bash at Don Knotts' pad. Guess who showed up? Desi Arnaz Jr., his drum set, and the entire Beverly Hills High football team.
That is a stupid story, or my name isn't Carmen Miranda.
Carmen Miranda, I always wondered what it would be like to be you and wear those crazy hats.
Everybody wants to know what it was like in the Hollywood heyday. It was great. You looked at a man and you said, hey!
Wonder if Marilyn could advise me.
Oh, pardon me for breaking in, but I heard my name mentioned. It's me, Marilyn, and I just want to thank everyone for making me.
Oh, that didn't sound right. Thank everyone for making me what I am today. That sounded right.
Stop playing dueling divas at Karen's expense. Karen, I am going to read you your Carmen Miranda rights. You have the right to move your hips and sing a sexy song like this. Boom, chicka, boom, 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 boom. Boom, you should be at MGM, not
Yeah.
Warner Brothers.
You see what I had to put up with? Well, when I moved on to college, I went to USC, and I was so ecstatic to be on my own. I was actually not going to be living at the house, even though Dad's house was only 30 miles away. I wanted to get into a sorority. So I was standing on the corner of Sorority Way, and I was already out of place because all the other girls dressed alike. They had on these sundresses with skinny straps and their blonde hair pulled up in barrettes, and I had on my best disco outfit. All of a sudden, I hear this pointing and people talking, and somebody blurted out, "Look over there, it's Don Knotts!" Oh no. I looked over.
there was my father. He had been following me. Now, you probably think that's sweet, but in the police car wearing his deputy uniform, I ran over to the car and I said, "Dad, what are you doing here?" He said, "I just want to make sure you're going to be okay your first week on your own." Oh.
Well, I did end up pledging the Chi Omega sorority, which was like the house of nerds. But I was the only drama geek in the house. USC had a good drama department, too. I was casting character roles, comedy parts, even a few leading ladies. But my real training didn't come until a few years after I graduated. Dad asked me if I'd like to be in plays and go on the road with him. Oh my God! Yes! So our first play together was The Mind with the Dirty Map. Now, I'm not making that up, as you can see. Dad played an uptight businessman, and Rue McClanahan played his wife, and I played Lucretia, a spinstery neighbor who spies on everyone. Ooh. Well, it was so exciting being in plays with Dad. The minute he stepped out on that stage, he exhilarated the audience. And the whole cast was in awe of him, too. And when he'd take his curtain call at the end of the show, he always got standing ovations. I was still learning. I just got sitting ovations. Dad loved doing live theater, but he didn't like life on the road. It brought out his neurotic tendencies. He was a guy who could go from being morose to happy-go-lucky to morose. Kind of like today's economy, you know. But
I was just so happy to be there. You know, he was always complaining about the accommodations, and one time he was really bad. He was going, "The water is too cold. The air conditioning is too hot. This mirror is so dusty, I can't even recognize myself. I look like Tim Conway."
that is a portrait of Tim Conway. They put it there so you feel more at home. This is the mirror over here. Oh, well, that's more like it.
When we got back from being on the road to Los Angeles, I decided to find an agent to help me with my own acting career, and I found one.
Her name was Diane, and she was with a very prestigious talent agency. It was called Diane's Talent Agency Incorporated. She sent me out on some auditions, and I started getting some sitcoms. I even got to do one with Dad. Now, this was called Front Page Fiendy, and Dad played a detective, and I played a rather spinstery secretary. And when I did my scenes, Dad stood behind the camera and made faces, and I imitated him.
Whenever that big story breaks, I'm onto it. Pick any headline, and chances are the byline is Don Beatty.
Maintenance?
And then in 1986, they decided to make Return to Mayberry. I got a speaking role.
And I played the part of Rudine, a spinstery secretary to the now grown-up. And I had a scene with Andy Griffith.
Oh, hello.
Is Mr. Taylor in?
May I tell him who's calling, please?
Mr. Taylor.
Oh, you're Mr. Taylor's Mr. Taylor. I mean, his father.
Yeah.
Would you like a cookie?
No thank.
Beef jerky?
No thank.
I'll have to tell you something. When we first shot that scene, I was so nervous to be working with Andy Griffith. Oh my God! And it was his idea for me to be eating that cookie. It was a brilliant idea because I had to concentrate on chewing and talking at the same time, so it took my mind off of trying to impress him, you know.
One day, the audition stopped coming.
But the hardest part was I had to tell my dad.
His reaction really kind of surprised me. He suggested that I train for another career so that I could pay my bills and at the same time pursue acting. Well, I said, what kind of career do you have in mind? He said, I think you'd make a great librarian, and I'll pay for you to go back to school. Okay, just 1 second, Dad. I'll be right back.
Librarian! My mother wants me to be a spinster! Dad, you mean there's an actual school for librarians? What do? Give you classes in how to Pull your hair with a tight bun, stick a number 2 pencil behind your ear, make you wear clothes from the really old Navy store. You know, Dad, when people go like this to you, it means they think you're a librarian. That night, I had a horrifying dream. I saw myself in my future career.
Well, everybody, thank you for coming to the afternoon tea. We're here today because people want to know what questions are being asked in the library. According to our survey, the most frequently asked question is, where's the restroom?
Now, the most personal question we have been asked is, are pregnant librarians ever overdue?
No, but it does prove they've been in circulation. The most popular reference question we've had
Is, who were the 2 Indian chiefs before Geronimo? They were Geronimo Curly and Geronimo Larry. Now I will take a question from the audience.
You, sir, with the round glasses and bow tie, what's your question? Oh, he asked, what is a limpet? A limpet is a single-gilled gastropod, as seen in the movie The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Now, here's a bit of trivia for you film buffs out there. The star of that movie, Don Knotts, was rumored to have lips like those of the rock star Mick Jagger. That is ridiculous. If you've seen Mick Jagger's lips, he could swallow South America. Don Knotts could barely swallow Brazil. One other question we've been asked is, do librarians have any vices? Sometimes when no one's looking, I'll go up to a shelf of new bestsellers and very quickly judge a book by its cover.
That was a terrible dream. But the absurdity of the dream made me realize that being a librarian couldn't be that bad. So I decided to tell Dad that I would like to pursue a career as a librarian. So I went back to school and got my degree, and now I work as a librarian in the Los Angeles Public Library.
Yay!
I can actually prove I'm a librarian. 935C721. That's the Dewey Decimal number for the book My Short Life by Gary Coleman. He's the reason, perfect example, my father didn't want me to become a child actor. In library school, I learned what sections of the books go in. It isn't easy. For example, a biography of Britney Spears, would that be considered fact fiction or Ripley's Believe It or Not? And did you know that Bill Clinton is opening his own section of the library? They're mostly pop-up books and they're not for kids. That's my librarian humor. Now, a lot of people lately have been asking me, why have I never been married? And I will tell you. The reason is because I'm a librarian. Not that I haven't tried. I have looked in the library for any eligible single men. I'm sure you've heard the stories about, men who fantasize about the spinster yet sexy librarians. And if you've been to the library lately, which most of you probably haven't because you Google, but if you have, you know that most of the guys who go to them are under 13, and I just can't wait that long. But one day I was at the reference desk. This guy came in, I'm telling you, he was hot. He came over to the reference desk and he began to reference me. He said, "Hello, are you who I think you are?" "Oh, who do you think I am?" "The librarian." "Yes, and who are you?" "My name is Ronaldo Joaquin Jesus Santiago Rodriguez Gideon." That was his real name. I said, "Gideon? Where does the Gideon come from?" "It comes from a very good book." All right, I thought we had something in common there. So we started dating. We'd go for long walks in the park and on the beach.
So romantic. I would read to him from his favorite book, How to Become a United States Citizen in 5 Easy Steps. And he said to me,
Let's get married. Was this a proposal of marriage? Oh my, I had to call Dad. I called Dad and I told him he was in Kansas City doing a play, and he told me that he was also getting ready to tie the knot with his third wife, Francie. And when I met Francie, she was just adorable, so sweet. And I remember thinking, you know, if Dad were dating any younger, I'd be driving my stepmother to kindergarten. But I did love Francie.
my marriage was not to be because the INS showed up. I said farewell to my dearly departed. They sent him to Canada.
Where he's teaching the cha-cha to draft dodgers. I made sure that my next boyfriend was going to be with a much more serious guy and a naturalized citizen. Jeffrey. The only problem with this relationship was it got off on the wrong foot. Because, as is often happens to me, people introduced me as Don Knott's daughter, and they didn't say my name. So he assumed that my name was Donna. I kept calling me Donna all the time. Well, Jeffrey, I am not Donna Knotts. I am Karen Knotts. I have my own identity, separate from my dad. I'm not a knockoff of him. This is what Donna Knotts looks like. Unfortunately, I never saw him in that getup. Fortunately, Dad, as he got older, he continued to work in plays and movies and, of course, Three's Company. And then there was exciting news. He was going to get his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We all got to be in the ceremony. It was so great. You know, he aged so gracefully. It was hard to believe it when he reached the age of 81. Doesn't he look great? I mean, well, just as good news can come out of the blue, so can bad news. And I was working at the library one evening, and I got a call from Francie, and she said that Dad was very sick. And they were in an ambulance taking him to the hospital, and Andy Griffith was on his way there, too. When I got down there, he was in the pulmonary unit. Turned out to be lung cancer. We were all there with him. He was hooked up to a machine, so wasn't feeling any pain. But at one point, I asked him, I said, Dad, are you going to pull through this? And his eyes just rolled to the back of his head, and he said, nope. So I talked to him from my heart, and I said, Dad, you've been the most wonderful father. You always told me, when in doubt, smile, and that a good joke or a funny story can get you through just about anything. I just wish I had something funny to tell you right now. You know how they say that when a person is very near the end, the spirit rises above. So at one point, hey buddy, are you up there? Can you hear me? It got very quiet because we were all lost in our own thoughts. And suddenly, we all looked at each other at the same moment. The sound of the machine stopped. And we knew that he was gone.
And then I thought of something that helped me get through that time. It was that show, that variety show that I was on when I was 16 years old.
Where are you going, my little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? Turn around and you're two. Turn around and you're four. Turn around and you're a young girl going out of the door. Turn around, turn around and you're a young girl going out of the door. Where are with dirndls and petticoats. Where have you gone? Turn around and you're tiny. Turn around and you're grown. Turn around and you're a young wife with babes of your own. Turn around, turn around, turn around and you're a young wife with babes of your own. With babes of your own.
Are you tired, honey?
A little.
Well, it's been a long day. You want to go home and decorate the tree?
Okay. Here's your coat, Dad.
Oh, thank you.
And don't forget your scarf. It's getting chilly outside.
Oh, that's my little girl. You're still not getting the car. Good night, folks. Happy Christmas.
My life did turn around. And one of the best things about it is being able to celebrate him and our life together. And it's wonderful being able to share these memories with all of you.
And even though my dad is gone, it'll always be him and me tied up in knots. And that's plural, not possessive. Thank you.